What is up, and welcome to an emergency edition of the Bruin Bible. This is Will Decker. I am joined by All Bruins SI writer Sam Connon. What is going on, my man?
Not much, Will. A bit of a surprise busy day. How are you doing yourself?
I'm doing good, man. I'm a little down on our Bruins. I think there were two moves that I was not particularly a fan of. We're going to get to Mitchell Agude entering the transfer portal, which I think was a big, costly thing for the Bruins defense. I think he was kind of the face of the defense coming back. But what I want to start with is the Bruins finally landed the coveted defensive coordinator, Sam. It is Bill Mcgovern, hired from the Chicago Bears effectively. He was the linebackers coach there. Was fired with the Matt Nagy staff. Um, it just seems like a pretty lateral move to me, from Jerry Azzinaro, given that he has spent time with Azzinaro on the coaching staff for 2 to 3 decades, whether it was his time at Boston College or UMass or with the Eagles. And I think, when we had our initial conversation about potential defensive coordinators, we're talking about the likes of TJ Rushing, Jimmy Lake, even Clancy Pendergrass. I think names that I would have all taken over Bill Mcgovern. Obviously he hasn't coached a game yet. I don't want to, kill the guy for not having put something on the field yet, but it just feels very much a similar feel to Azzinaro. I want to get your thoughts on it, Sam. Give me a grade on the hiring of Bill Mcgovern.
Well, like you said, it's hard to completely trash a guy who hasn't been out there for this UCLA team, whether it's in practice or in a game. But just impulse grade, I think I'm gonna have to go C.
Yeah,
I feel like I have a lot of the same concerns as you when it comes to the lateral movement from Azzinaro to McGovern, because, like you said, they worked together at UMass in the early 90s, at Boston College in the mid 90s. They were position coaches together. McGovern was actually the defensive coordinator at UMass right before Azzinaro took over, when Azzinaro was under him. So Azzinaro learned under McGovern. So for anyone who wanted anyone but Az, congrats, you get the guy who made Az who he is. Or maybe it's the other way around. They've worked on a lot of staffs together, whether it's with the Eagles under Chip, Boston College, UMass. I feel like the positive thing of making a defensive coordinator change from the fan perspective this offseason is, well, at least we just get to move on from Jerry Azzinaro. And as it turns out, you just get Jerry Azzinaro 2.0. You get a Northeast kind of East Coast guy, went to Holy Cross, most of his early college experiences at Holy Cross, UMass, Boston College. And then he went to the NFL, was a positional coach there, and he had 1 year as a defensive assistant at Nebraska. But other than that, never coached west of the Mississippi. So when it comes to recruiting in Southern California, it doesn't seem like he has too many contacts. So it's pretty much as 2.0, which is, I don't want to say worst case scenario, but that's definitely not what people were looking for.
Definitely not, man. And I think the things that we established in our initial conversation when looking for, the next defensive coordinator, we wanted two things. We wanted a new scheme, and we wanted, a guy that can go out there and recruit, because Chip Kelly kind of is more of an X's and O's guy. He's not the guy that's going to go into your home and shake hands and do all the necessary things. And, it's just frustrating because I think we got neither of those things. I think we're going to stick with the 4-2-5. You probably know this better than I would. Is Brian Norwood still on staff going into next
He
year?
is, and I think the thing that you're saying about sticking with the 4-2-5 is, not only is Brian Norwood still on the staff, but they're sticking with Brian Norwood's defense, unless they make an unexpected change. But to once again have an assistant head coach and defensive backs coach and a defensive coordinator come in at different times and have two different defenses and be on different pages, once again, like has been the case the past 2 years, there's going to be question marks about where to spread the blame. Like, oh, is it really Az's fault, or it's Norwood's defense, it's Norwood's scheme, and Chip's the one in charge. So you would have liked to see this defensive coordinator change made at the beginning of December. So then the new defensive coordinator could bring in his whole staff and it could be a complete reset. And that's not to say that Akika Malloy or Chad Kua are bad assistant coaches. They bring their own things to the table and it's good. But the fact that they were brought in before this guy, and there are holdovers in Don Pelham and Brian Norwood. It
Yeah.
just makes it feel like there isn't going to be any change, whether schematically or organizationally. It's just going to be the same thing with new names.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, man. And it just feels like you alluded to, man. Asanero 2.0 is what we're kind of getting. I do want to say though, like if we had hired him a decade earlier, around 2012 when Jim Mora was just starting, it wouldn't be a terrible hire. This guy was the linebackers coach and defensive coordinator at Boston College, and he coached up the likes of like Luke Kuechly and Mark Herzlich, two really talented linebackers that were in the running for the Butkus Award. You guys astutely pointed out in your article that you guys posted to All Bruins, he had 2 top 20 defenses nationally in his first 2 years coaching Boston College. I think the biggest problem that I have is this guy has been out of touch with recruits, as he went to the NFL over a decade ago. And it's frustrating because I think there was a little bit of a chance where we know the dominant USC teams are coming, maybe as early as next year. With a guy like Caleb Williams coming in, Lincoln Riley has already kind of established what he's able to do in the transfer market. I felt like we really needed a defense to kind of keep up with the likes of this exploding air raid offense that USC is going to have. And I just don't feel like we got that covered with a guy like that. And ultimately that falls on Chip, man. I think with Chip, it's a trust issue with him. He seems to lack trust outside of his coaching community. As he brought Asanero with him. Even when it was time to pull the plug on Asanero, he had defenses that ranked in the hundreds at times. He couldn't let go because of his trust there. And then he kind of just goes to the next guy. And it's incredibly frustrating, Sam, I think, for me and UCLA fans as a whole, because next year we got Dorian Thompson-Robinson coming back. We got a freaking Zach Charbonnet coming back, Sam. I mean, I think our offense is going to be fine, but the defensive problems, I just don't think they're going to go anywhere. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. And for as much as we're saying this is as 2.0 in terms of scheme and profile, he at least has some positives. He has some track record of success, unlike Az, because when you look at Az, where he was defensive coordinator at Duke and UMass and wherever else the decade and plus before he got to UCLA, none of that was good. At least with McGovern, yes, he comes from a similar profile, and that isn't really the stuff you want for a new age, up and coming, recruiting heavy kind of guy as your defensive coordinator. But like you were saying, he had the number 19 scoring defense in 2009 and 2010 with Boston College, dropped to somewhere in the 40s in 2011, and then dropped all the way to 70 in his last year there before Chip brought him to Philly. But yeah, is he going to turn one of these young linebackers at UCLA into the next Luke Kuechly? That'd be great. I don't know who that is. I don't know if he can do that still. If
Calvert,
he has,
maybe.
yeah, Bo Calvert in year 5 just becomes the next Luke Kuechly. I don't know. But there are some little promising things that make you think, well, he can be better than Az. But in terms of bouncing around, lower level position NFL guy, he's probably just going to give you more of the same. And yeah, the offense might take that next step, but with all of the bodies leaving the defense and so much turnover there, and the position coaches and in the front 7 and in the secondary when it comes to the roster, yeah, I don't see how you can have too much hope.
Yeah. And I think one of the big things that I'm kind of leaning towards, just schematically and like making a jump from the NFL back to college or college to the NFL, usually it doesn't work. I mean, we saw Urban Meyer, who is, outside of Nick Saban, maybe the best college football coach I've ever seen, struggle mightily when he went to the NFL. And, I just think they're totally different things at the end of the day. College football, you are the ruler, the dictator type of thing. Everything runs through you. You get to have total control. You get to recruit. And I think it is a 365-day-a-year job. Not that the NFL isn't, but I think you do have a lot more responsibilities in terms of getting into those homes, recruiting players, making sure they're happy, influencing your schematic, approach, the defense, the offense, With the NFL, you may not have that input. You might just show up and you've got your players already there with the GM, things like that. So that's the problem I have, the lack of recruiting coming in there. I ultimately give the hire about a C minus. I think they could have done way better with some of the names we mentioned in our previous pod. I do want to get to Mitchell Agude now. And this one may have stung a little bit more because I think this guy was on the verge of really putting it all together for a masterpiece season next year. Was injured for a little bit of this year, but he made all Pac-12 PFF, honorable mention with that. Had 4 forced fumbles in the first 2 games against Hawaii and LSU. His career totals are 78 tackles, 14 and a half tackles for a loss, 4.5 sacks, and 6 forced fumbles in 18 games, including the last 3 games, which you guys pointed out in the article. He at least had 1 tackle for a loss in each of those games. So he's kind of hitting his sweet spot ending the year, which made us excited as UCLA fans. Losing him to the transfer portal is a big deal. How hard is this for UCLA to recover, losing a potential star in Agude, who I had potentially being on the all first team Pac-12 roster next year?
Yeah, he's definitely a guy who could have contended for a spot like that, and he had shown flashes of being able to do it in the past. And you think the longer a guy sticks around in college, the more consistent, and the more they can kind of spread that out throughout the course of a year. And you would like to think it was 2022, or he was going to bring that all together. But it was a weird situation, a weird timeline where right a couple days after the NFL draft declaration deadline, he comes out on Twitter and says, let's give this college thing one more go, like coming back one more year. Post a video of his highlights, and everyone just, oh yeah, Mitchell Agude is coming back, great. But he didn't say anything about UCLA in that tweet. It wasn't like all these other guys who are announcing they're coming back for their super senior season, like Antonio Mafi or Martin Andrews, or these other guys. He kind of just neglected to mention UCLA when he was saying he was coming back to college, which I feel like should have tipped people off a little bit, but everyone's just so caught up in like, oh yeah, he's back, it's great. I'm not saying he knew he was transferring 4 weeks ago, but I mean, he probably was considering it as an option, and ultimately that's where he went. And now UCLA is in a position where that defensive end spot is going to be pretty tough because you lose obviously Agude. And then at the very beginning of December, one of the first guys to enter the transfer portal was Miles Jackson, who didn't shine totally when he did play because Agude was getting a lot of the snaps, but he was a good young pass rusher in that edge rusher position. Well, he goes to Indiana. Agude is leaving. And now what? You have Devin Opiu, who was a freshman this past season. He was a summer transfer from Notre Dame. He was a physical looking guy who stood out in practice a lot, but didn't do too much in games. And then you got Leatu Latu, who's
retired because of a medical issue, and now he's back playing. So that's kind of a sketchy thing right there too. So I mean, it's just it's not ideal. I think when he came back, there was such a joy among UCLA fans. Wow, we got arguably the best defender we could possibly have coming back, with the likes of Agbania and Quentin Lake and those guys off to the NFL. Agude was kind of the guy we were circling to come back, and now he's said he was declaring to come back. I think we all took that as he's going to be a Bruin. Not the case, man. So I think it's really tough to kind of figure that out. And like you said, lack of guys kind of behind him to really step up and take leadership of that role. I want to talk to you lastly about the transfer portal. We've had 5 starters enter the transfer portal. It's kind of a big deal. Jay Shaw's headed to Wisconsin, Chase Cota, DJ Warnell, and Luke Akers, the punter. Do you think this is a chip issue, or do you think this is, more of guys just wanting to get more playing time elsewhere, or different scheme fit? Because Cota, for my money, was a guy that I thought the UCLA offense should have utilized more. This guy was a high school All-American coming out of Oregon. He played in the Army All-American game. Every time he touched the ball, he seemed to be making some big-time plays, but that was kind of the issue, was the lack of touches he received. Do you think this is a chip issue among these players transferring out?
I wouldn't say that, and I wouldn't say that it definitely spreads to all of them, because as much as the transfer portal is becoming such a big topic to talk about. It's so hard to have one blanket reason or issue or something. So yeah, in Chase Coda's case, it might have been touches, but he also it's his fourth year. He's getting his degree. Maybe some of these guys can't get into the grad programs they're looking at, or maybe they want to go back home. Most of these guys who have entered the transfer portal, starters or otherwise, are from out of state. I think it was DJ Warrenell. I believe it was his high school coach who seemed pretty upset that Warrenell was not playing cornerback, which he had played in high school. So sometimes it's schematic thing. Sometimes it's relationship with the coach. Sometimes it's grad school. Sometimes it's want to be closer to home. So I don't want to put all of the blame on Chip. For some of them, yeah, maybe he takes some guys off and they want to go running away. But it is what it is. I think the bigger issue isn't so much the guys leaving, but how Chip plans to replace them. A lot of other schools also have starters transferring away, have depth pieces transferring away, but they're recruiting big classes and highly ranked classes to have the succession plan in effect pretty much. Chip, he only signed 11 guys for this current cycle. He's only put out, I want to say, 35 offers for class of 2023, which is less than even Stanford. And Stanford is usually the stingiest team in the country when it comes to giving out offers. So there's not a lot of depth in this program, especially once you get past this year when all those super senior guys leave. And yeah, that's when the transfers really start to bite you in the butt.
Yeah, man. Well, Sam, I want to thank you so much for coming on again, giving this Bruins update. Hopefully we can have you on again the rest of the off season. You're so much fun as a guest to come on, and please read him at All Bruins SI. He's doing phenomenal stuff there. That's where we get a lot of our stuff for the Bruin Bible. Sam Connon, thank you so much again, my brother.
Thanks so much for having me again, Will.